So I'm Angelica Sater. I'm the executive director for NRBS. We've got a number of the board members here. I can't see everybody's name. Mitch Sater, Jeff Schutz is here. Saul's usually here. He might not be in my picture yet. And I just want to tell you, NRBS is really working hard to make it a community for clinicians. We're looking to see what do clinicians want, but we're also looking to bring new clinicians into the field. And in that regard, I'm going to talk about the conference that we have planned October 24th through 26th. It's in Manhattan. If you've ever wanted to go to Manhattan and you haven't gone, man, come. We are like, the hotel is awesome. It is like a boutique hotel. The price is good. They gave us a super good price. The location is awesome. It's in a part of Manhattan. It's awesome. We've got a Circle Line cruise. If you don't know what that is, you need to go on that. We've got a rooftop engagement. We've partnered with the New York City School District, the consortium of New York City schools. So if you know any teachers, the program is very robust. We've got Bessel Vanderkolk coming. We've got Thomas Campbell coming, talking about nutrition. We've got Stoyan, whose last name I can't even say, is coming over from Germany. He's talking about screens and addictions and how that looks like autism, but it's not. Got people talking about exercise. So we're really broadening out. Of course, we're going to cover neurofeedback and biofeedback. Eric Pepper is going to come and do his stuff. He does a nice job. So anyway, enough about the conference. Please come. We're looking forward to seeing you. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the podcast. I recently did a lot of driving and caught up on a bunch of the podcasts, and they're good. These are really good. I listened to Donald Moss and Patrick Steffen, and I was like, yeah, that's good stuff. It's good to, even if it's a refresher, it's good to get it in your brain. And that's a way to get word out. So if you guys listen to the podcast, you like it, do that click, because that gets it out to more people. And that's what we're all about, is getting the word out about biofeedback and neurofeedback and how we can help people. And the meeting that we're here today is for us providers. And I want to thank our speaker is Jeffrey Schutz. He is a sponsor of NRBS. And that's really where these webinars are coming from, are the sponsors. They're doing them for us. In addition to being board certified in neurofeedback, he's an ordained minister. He's a specialist in counseling couples and families with special needs children. And as I said, a member of the NRBS board. He brings a lot of enthusiasm, and open-mindedness, and a lot of energy to his work. And he is the owner and director of Neurovation Center in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. Philanthropy is a big part of his work. A percentage of his clinic revenue is actually donated to charities. Today, he's going to present as a sponsor of NRBS and to help us understand the language of the brain, or QEEG-ish. So he's also an inventor of languages and going to be talking about tactics for translating brain to anyone. And that's an interesting thing because a lot of people don't know about neurofeedback. Ronnie and I recently did a tour in Manhattan. We went to 25 stores and asked the store owners, have you ever heard of neurofeedback? One. And one heard of Bessel Vanderkolk. We were like, oh my God, we got a lot of work to do. Okay. We're going to save our questions for the end, put them in the chat. I'll kind of cull them together, and I'm going to hand it over to Jeff. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, too, for coming today. Real privilege and an honor to be able to speak with you. I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with these Zoom deals. I like the fact that so many people can join, which is awesome. However, one of my favorite things about doing seminars or conferences is just playing the opportunity to see you, talk to you, shake a hand. So I hope that everybody out there is going to actually think about doing the NRBS conference that's coming up. Be great to shake hands and just kind of get to know folks, maybe over a glass of wine or something like that later in the evening or just in between sessions. So if you're not signed up, that's my pitch. I love being a part of the NRBS because it really resonates with my heart. I love what I do. I hope you do too. I love it because it's different, it's revolutionary, it's game changing, it changes people's lives. And a lot of what we want to do is elevate the entire industry. I mean, we want to get people out there, recognition, and see you be everything that you can be. So what I'm doing today, I'm going to introduce you guys all to the concept of QEEG-ish. Now, this is I admit, this is intentionally designed to be a little bit more laid back today. I know it's the summertime, but don't take that as an excuse for it not being useful. I use this as a very playful term, but I take it very seriously. And we're going to go a little bit more into that. Everybody can see all of these images here. Right? You guys got my PowerPoint that's out there. Thumbs up on that. Good.
It's red. Yeah.
Fantastic. Just a little bit about me. I mean, obviously, Angelica's already said some stuff. I'm the owner and executive director of the Neuroinnovation Center in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. I also have another company called Neuroinnovation Consulting Services. Bunch of other stuff that we got going on. I'm going to just kind of bypass all that, and we're going to jump into talking a little bit more about QEEG-ish. I mean, I would imagine the first question that you guys are going to have is, what the heck is he talking about? So QEEG-ish is a skill set that I encourage every neurofeedback clinician to cultivate and develop. This is the way that you're going to take all of the languaging, all of the concepts, everything that has to do with neurofeedback and biofeedback and the field that we're involved in, and it allows it to be translated into something meaningful for our clients, right? How many times do you have somebody coming in that just has no concept of what's going on? That this is a completely different world for them. I mean, frankly, that's the vast majority of people that we're ever going to interact with. And you and I have an obligation to connect with them. We have an obligation to help them to understand what's going on. And not only that, but one of the things that I find is there is a direct correlation between my client's ability to understand what's going on and to feel connected and to feel hope-filled and to feel empowered in this process and their actual outcomes, not the least of which is the client satisfaction. So these are all big things, certainly in a field where our outcomes make a difference, where a lot of, if you're like me, a lot of the new clients that you get are the results of really good feedback from other past clients, right? They're giving referrals. They're sharing stuff with their friends and encouraging them to try it. So QEEG-ish is really about developing a language that allows you to communicate. Now, I have fun with this. I have to be honest. I've got my AI platform and I'm kind of typing in stuff and I'm getting it to give me, derivatives of QEEG-ish. So we came up with a really nice formal definition. I'm kind of playing around with stuff like this. So, if you are starting to feel a little bit of QEEG-ishness, don't worry. I am a QEEG guru. I'm a professional at this and I can help you through it. So we're going to go a step at a time. We're going to start working through this. We're going to learn a little bit more about QEEG-ish and figure out how we can use it. And I think Angelica started to indicate, almost stealing my thunder, but a beautiful intro, quite frankly, in that you and I face amazing, dauntless challenges in terms of presenting the product that we offer, right? Can you imagine somebody walking into an auto dealership and saying, oh my gosh, I really need a transportation, some form of transportation. I've been walking and I've been riding a horse. Got anything else? And the salesperson's just looking at you going, you've been walking and riding, would you like to look at an F-150? And the person looks and goes, what's an F-150? It's a truck. What's a truck? It's something with an engine that goes really fast that you drive on the road, and it makes it really easy to go from point A and point B. And they look at you and go, it sounds like magic to me. But isn't that what we deal with on a regular basis? On a regular basis, we're dealing with really groundbreaking, solid science rooted in EEG, neuroelectrical rhythms, brain science, really solid stuff, and nobody even knows about it. And they're trying to figure out, you mean there's another way that you can treat my mental health issues? There's another way that you can explain my symptoms? And we've got to figure out how to communicate that there's an entirely different game-changing approach that nobody even knows about. And so not only that, right now when you start mentioning it, now you've got to overcome the doubt, the skepticism. They're wondering, right? I always tell folks, and I'll come back to this later, and this is how one of the ways that I connect with folks is they'll be like, doesn't this seem a little weird? And I'm like, look, you got to understand, I'm a convert myself. When I first found out about this, I'm like literally looking at it and I'm going, seriously, you mean to tell me that you can cure or some such thing, ADHD, by putting a dumb looking cap on somebody's head who's watching a TV show? Really? I think we'll be selling a bridge down in Brooklyn, if you want to get into this. Feels like snake oil sometimes, but it's not. There's a lot of science behind it. So we have to get to that. And then again, we're also, kind of going against the prevailing winds, aren't we? Right? We're kind of dealing with a medically based model that has only two options: talk about it or take a pill for it. We're either going to learn how to cope with it or we're going to cover it up. In many cases, those are the kinds of things. We're biased in our modalities. A lot of times we're stuck with trying to explain things with a diagnostic code that doesn't work. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir right now, but also keep in mind that when we talk to them, we're using all kinds of neurobabble. Like when we try to bridge the gap and we start talking about, neuroelectrical potentials and potassium ion pumps and, beta spindles and excess beta waves and all these alpha peak frequency, and everybody's looking at us and they start drooling because they're like, okay, I don't even know what that means. And so the reason we want to learn QEEG-ish is so that we can begin to deal with these things. Now, while you're reading through my slide, I'm just kind of making the point that you and I are trained on all kinds of different stuff. When you go through BCIA's Foundations of Knowledge, we've got lots of great stuff that we learn about. The history of the field, the key players. We learn all about neuroanatomy and neurophysiology, and we learn about neurons and how everything works. Huge, very important. I love it. And then we're learning about neuroanalysis, brain maps, EEGs. We're learning about how to generate protocols. We're learning about all of the different amplifier specs to performance data. You want to know what's missing? The ability to communicate. And that's probably what I would argue is one of the most significant things that we have to add to our practices if we're ever going to be successful in getting the message out there. Right? I tell folks all the time, I'm like, neurofeedback is not another tool that anyone should add to their tool belt. It's not. It's a paradigm shift. The very way that we're thinking about diagnosing people, the very way that we're thinking about treating, the way that we're coming up with treatment plans, framing symptom etiology, it's all completely different. And we need a language that allows us to express this in a way that clients can relate to. That's what QEEG-ish is all about. So let's talk about the secret sauce. Where are we going to conceptualize this? What do we need to think about? Keep in mind, right? QEEG-ish is not a process or a protocol. Now, it's instrumental in communicating your processes and protocol, but it's fundamentally about developing language skills that make you relatable to people who don't know about neurofeedback. Again, keep in mind, it's proclinical. It's neurobabble avoidant, right? It's definitely not trying to dumb anything down, but it is trying to make it accessible. And a lot of times, and this is where it starts to get a little bit fun. When I talk to my clients, I am regularly translating by using metaphors, stories, sense of humor, right? We say all the time in my office, the only thing that hurts about neurofeedback in the Neurobation Center is Jeff's sense of humor. If you can deal with all the bad dad jokes, you will probably survive. And most of the time people get a real kick out of that. And it's just kind of true. Nothing hurts. But we try to make it a little bit fun by telling stories, things that people can relate to, right? Because ultimately, I want to communicate in a way that brings people in. I want to communicate in a way that ennobles those individuals. Now, I get it. There's a lot of folks that'll come in and they just want help. But trust me when I tell you, everybody loves to learn about themselves. Everybody's dying to find out about what's going on in their brain. Everybody wants it. The same way that everybody wants you to read the tea leaves or, do their astrology chart, or everybody wants to, right, get their Myers-Briggs assessment. And again, not trying to minimize this, but I am saying that people are dying to find out what their brain says. And if you bring them along in this process, they're going to love you for it. And that's a lot about what our secret sauce is all about, right? I love it when I go in and I'm talking with my clients in the consultation, not the consultation, sorry, in my intake phase, right? When I'm talking to my clients, I always tell them at the initial consult, I go, you got 3 1-hour appointments that are going to get you locked and loaded, ready to go with neurofeedback. Okay. Here's the 3 1-hour appointments. There's the goopy one, there's the boring one, and then there's the super fantastic, amazing, awesome one. And people will typically be looking at me like, what? Now, get me on this. I just explained the process with some sticky concepts. The goopy one, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. That's your cue acquisition. And it gives me an opportunity to talk about that. What's the boring one? It's your case history intake. Listen, I set the standard super low because I'm going to spend an hour asking you guys all of those silly questions that you can't stand writing in the answers to when you go to the doctor's office. You know what I'm talking about. Why do you need to tell me about your developmental history? Why do I need to know if you've had concussions? What do I care about the diet and exercise? All these are questions that we're asking about people. Why? Because I always tell them, you are not your brain. No, you're not you without it. That's true. However, your brain is in a context, and I need to know that context. And I'm going to try to make it as non-boring as possible. Goopy, boring. And then what's the third one? The super phantasmagorical, awesome one. I made that word up, phantasmagorical, in case you didn't know that. I like to invent words. I'll throw a couple of other ones in there too, but it kind of makes it whimsical. And then they look at me and they go, are you overpromising? I go, not at all. My absolute favorite appointment, right? And now part of my QEEG-ish is to instill hope. And I'm looking at these folks and I'm going, what I love to do is to explain your results, because when I complete it, you will feel validated. It will make sense. You'll like what you see. I have almost never completed a review session with one of my clients and had them disappointed. I've done over 4,000. It just doesn't happen. They love it. So that's a part of what I want to do. And then also along the line, keep in mind, you got to shape and manage expectations and embody hope. I'm going to keep us moving forward because I don't want to fall behind. I know that everybody wants some examples. We're going to have some fun with this. And hopefully in the end, we don't have just questions. Maybe some of you guys will actually share some of your favorite QEEG-ishly interesting analogies. All right. So who are we going to use this on? Well, obviously clients. That's easy. But trust me when I tell you, and some of you will go, really? Like, I use this with other professionals that I talk to. And like, number one, therapists. Therapists don't know what is going, I mean, all the time, in order for me to coordinate treatment with other clinicians that are providing therapy, and I'm doing the neurofeedback, this is a wonderful way to bridge that gap, to bring them in, to make them feel confident, comfortable, excited about what's going on. I actually use it with neurologists, and some of you may go, ooh, right? Because I hope there's no neurologists here today, but not exactly, I'm not entirely sure that a lot of our neurologist friends know what SNL stands for. But anyway, I'll move on. I won't be too I'm sorry. If I offended anybody, that's okay. You can yell at me. I'm just, having fun with it. You can make fun of me too. But I said, sometimes it's kind of like helping these folks that are relentlessly stuck in a medically based model to recognize that the spark actually matters. We don't have to just focus on the soup anymore. And it's funny, even if I use that kind of terminology, boom, all of a sudden the lights go on and they start thinking, wait, maybe there is something to it. But trying to use language and connection in order to get people to understand that neurofeedback is real and here, communicating what it is. I use it all the time with mentorship. I love bringing in interns. I do this 3-4 times a year. I'll bring in 3 to 5 interns. I'll immerse them in everything that I do for a week. Why? Because nobody knows what neurofeedback is. And if you can get immersed in it, you'll fall in love with it. almost every single student that comes to my office makes a commitment that they're going to become a neurofeedback clinician. It's pretty cool. And I would tell you a lot of that has to do with the fact that I know how to communicate, that I can help them to understand what it is and where it fits. Now let's kind of get on to this whole thing with business identity, right? We all know about things like mission, core values, vision, but there's certain ways that you want to integrate this QEEG-ish concept into understanding things like positioning, voice, marketing. Those are big items. So we're going to head in that direction. All right, let's keep going. Now, let me just give a couple of caveats. Just because I use silly terms, silly stories, and all kinds of stuff like that, and I try to use humor, and I try to embody hope, and I try to make this a beautiful, wonderful, pleasant experience, doesn't mean that I do not take my job seriously. In fact, Ronnie and Angelica can attest to the fact that when I was deciding what is it that you wanted to talk about for your presentation, I was going back and forth between this and OCD biomarkers, thalamocortical dysrhythmia, and error mode response mechanisms, and how we can reverse those things to cure and treat not only OCD, but oppositionality. Okay, that's kind of hardcore. That one we'll go deep on. We can talk an awful lot about how rhythmic theta is the #1 biomarker that if you're diagnosed with OCD, you'll have it. Great, we'll go deep on that. I talk to people all the time about rhythmic theta in the anterior cingulate. Good stuff. But you want to know what? I wanted to talk more about having QEEG-ish. Why? Because I feel like it's probably more important for you to learn how to communicate than just the fact that we've got rhythmic theta that's tied to OCD. I'm kind of just making this point to say, I'm not dumbing stuff down. I'm committed to this field. I'm committed to making sure that we have a very high level of practice. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to do so much work to mentor. One of the reasons why I like to do public speaking. I want to raise the quality of our field and make sure that we're professional on every level. So I don't want QEEG-ish to take away from that. And I also know that I have to gauge my use of language according to the people that I'm speaking with. Some people don't have much of a tolerance for humor. Okay, I'll adjust it. And then there's other ones, forget it. My wife tells me all the time, I am a 55-year-old child. I never grew up out of being a kid. I still wish I was a kid. It's great. And so I relate to kids really, really well. And I love talking to kids about neurofeedback and making them understand what it is. I don't ever want to lose sight of what's going on in the context. I just did a review with the parents of an 11-year-old. The 11-year-old had a very significant allergic reaction to a medication that ended up generating what they thought was brain injury. I'm not joking around with these guys. I'm taking into consideration what it is that these people are dealing with and how we can hope to help them, right? Jokes go great, but I'm still speaking QEEG-ish so that I can still them with hope. And then on the other side of this, I also want to make sure that I don't overpromise, right? That's one of the issues that we can find in our field. If you come to me, I can fix and I can cure everything. No, that's not the case, is it? Neurofeedback works really well in a lot of cases. I would tell you that 98, 99% of all my people walk away with something. It's not going to cure everything, so we don't want to overpromise. So anyway, those are just kind of a couple of little caveats that I wanted to kind of throw out there. And so now, let's have some fun. You guys ready? We good for that? We're going to throw out a couple of different ways of thinking and explore ways that we can use this. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our everyday interactions. And we're going to talk about how we can kind of implement some of our communication skills and business identity. We're going to talk about initial connections, right? And core mechanisms. How do you explain things like dysregulation and mechanisms of change and neuroplasticity and that kind of stuff? And we're also looking at neuroanalysis and biomarkers. We won't have tons of time to go over those, but I tend to have a QEEG-ish metaphor, story, analogy, something like that for just about every biomarker that I work with. So with that, let's kind of jump into it. Ye old elevator pitch. Now, how many of you folks have one of these? I can't exactly see it, but more of a rhetorical question, I suppose. I think it took me 10 years to figure this one out. I would tell you that the elevator pitch, in other words, telling somebody who you are, what you do, and why it matters in less than 30 seconds for neurofeedback is an utter and complete nightmare. Figuring it out. It's been like over 10 years I spent working on this. Why? Because when I tell people, all right, I got 30 seconds. Hi there. My name is Jeff Schutz, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist who does neurofeedback. Now, I've just lost almost a quarter of my time just saying that. And so trying to figure out when you're just kind of like out on the street, meeting with somebody, shaking hands with somebody, how to be able to bridge that gap. QEEG-ish is all about figuring this out, making it real, making the connection. I had the privilege of meeting with a guy that wanted to get neurofeedback, kind of a world-class branding marketing guy. And he was like, you know what? Let me help you out with this. A couple of hours later, the guy looks back at me and goes, really? You know what you're telling me? You guys speak brain. Brain has a language all its own, and you guys are masters of interpreting it. And not only that, but you can actually speak back to it in a way that tells it how to function well. And so this is revolutionary because all of the language of the brain, you can see symptoms associated with mental health disorders. So you guys are mental health people that speak brain. Ooh. Guys, that's an elevator pitch. What I just gave you is the essence of what I do when I communicate with people. Largely absent of neurobabble, something that people can relate to, and it's something that people will typically just kind of latch onto and go, really? Like, the brain speaks anxiety? Yeah, it does. Yeah, I can take a look at your EEG. I could tell you exactly what your symptoms are. I could tell you what form of anxiety you experience, because there's at least a dozen different biomarkers, minimum. And that doesn't even include the ways your brain can be creatively devious in generating different problems. And it just begins to then allow people to move forward. So one of the things I encourage you to do is keep in mind that you want to have something that allows you to speak quickly, easily, to grab people's attention, no matter where you go. All right. How about how you want to add this into your business? Right? Like I said, we know about mission, we know about core values, we know about things like, our vision and wanting to have all of those things in place. But when it comes down to is voice is actually how you communicate your brand. In my office, my voice is very simple. I am one part neuroscience, I am one part therapeutic counseling, and I'm a dash of Disney. That's me. That's my voice. And if you come and you visit my office, you're going to see it. You walk into my waiting area, it is a beautiful waiting area. Why? Because a lot of my clients will bring their children and they'll sit there for 45 minutes to an hour, 2 or 3 times a week. I want them comfortable. It's about 50 by 30 feet. It's got a 16-foot ceiling, and I've designed it according to an Indiana Jones Banana Republic style. It's just kind of funky. It looks cool. And I designed it intentionally. Why? Because I wanted people to know that I take this seriously. I also want them to know that it's a relaxed and it's a cool and it's a chill environment. And I wanted them to be surprisingly impressed. And then when you walk into the Nervation Station, which is my neurofeedback floor, everything was calculated to put technology in your face without making it scary. I want them to know that this is highly technologically advanced and it's also really cool and it's fun. My voice always will communicate that way. I use my environment. I use all the platforms I have to have that kind of a feel to it. And I want it to resonate with where my clients are at. I didn't want them to come to my office and feel like this was just another doctor's office. I didn't want a clinical feel. I wanted my voice to communicate more of what we had. So QEEG-ish will come into how you present yourself. QEEG-ish is also crucial for positioning. Positioning is how do we relate what we do, what we offer, what product we provide, how do we orient it to other options within the field. Now, what I do want to say and be very clear about on this, I spend very little time positioning against other neurofeedback providers. I think Anthony Silver's joined me today. Anthony is the one that introduced me to neurofeedback. He's Gray Matters down south, good friend of mine. I have no desire to position against him. Why? He's great. Anthony does a great job. And the better he does, the better I look. Not for nothing. Because if we all kind of raise each other up, we're raising the field up. And the more we spend time taking each other down, the more we kind of do a disservice to the neurofeedback world in general. So I'm committed to making people look good. Who am I positioning against? Therapy and medications, largely. Why? Not because I'm against them. I love them. I'm a therapist. I don't dislike what I do. And I'm not anti-med. I mean, again, I'm a med minimalist. I think we're over-medicated. Most people would seem to agree with that. But what I want to do is I want to say each one of these does really, really well in its lane. And we want to make sure that we can promote ourselves as separate, on the same level, and qualitatively a wonderful option, right? And I like to say that this is where one of our greatest challenges becomes one of our best marketing engines. Okay. Why do I say that? I'm going to kind of shift over. I'll keep us moving. Because when it comes to marketing, when I first got into this, I used to think, oh my gosh, the fact that I have to explain what it is and I got to do this and I'm always on my back foot. I was really distressed at having to figure out how to market this until I realized that people were coming to me precisely because they were looking for something that wasn't therapy and they were looking for something that wasn't meds. Not because I didn't like them, but because they were like, there has to be something different. Has to be something because it's not working. I've been going to my therapist for 7 years. I love them, but I still am anxious. And I've been taking meds for the last 4 years. I'm starting to get side effects. I still have panic attacks. They're literally out there going, there's got to be something. And then that's what I realized was that I could relate to them by positioning into that middle ground. And then I could start talking to them about how we are there to help them in their story to get this fixed. There's a different angle that we have. So at this point in time, I look to connect with them exactly where they're at in their frustration. And then I'm able to look at them and say, oh my gosh, boy, are you going to be excited to see what we have to offer. Because if therapy didn't work, it's probably because it wasn't addressing the underlying etiological issue. And if the meds didn't work, ditto. So if you've got symptoms being caused by something, and I'm telling you we have a completely different approach, maybe, just maybe, it suggests that we're going to have better outcomes. So I find that with the marketing, right, we can actually leverage the fact that nobody knows about it because everybody knows there's a void and we can help to get into that. All right, keep moving along. Let's get into some of this where we're going to start talking about now, again, QEEG-ish in action and talking about initial connections. When you have that person that's coming in for an initial consult, what are some tools? What are some tips that I would recommend about how to make a good connection, right? I tell folks when I'm training my clinicians, what are our goals for an initial consult? Number one, you want to connect with them. Number two, you have to help them to understand what neurofeedback is. And number three, you have to help them to make an informed decision about whether or not they want that process. So one of the first things you want to do, right? Connect with that client experience. This is what I was just talking about with the whole marketing angle. In basically looking at it and saying, yep, you tried this, you tried that, we're the missing link. And even using terminology like missing link and playing off of that kind of a concept, very QEEG-ish, it gives them something to think about, something that they can stick their thinking around. Again, not stinky. We don't want to use stinky ideas. We want to use sticky ideas and images. One of the things that I do, I'll use my exuberance for the field to start saying, now you realize why this is so different, right? Because for the first time ever, we can actually analyze the organ that's responsible for behavior. Kind of cool, right? Like never before. Med management doesn't do it. Therapists don't do it. We're actually directly taking a look at how your brain functions. And we can see, we can hear we can tell for the first time. Is that not exciting? Kind of answers one of their questions, doesn't it? Why haven't I heard of this before? New technology. Very cool stuff. I get it. Goes back to the 1960s. But for most people, this is very new technology. Just leaking in. So sticky ideas, first time ever. We can now speak brain, right? Go back to that idea. And then typically I'll be able to go back and just say, doesn't that make sense? Everybody looks at me like, why haven't we done this before? Exactly. This is the new frontier, guys. Everybody knows about the neuroscience. Everybody knows it's out there. Guess what? We're just applying it. And so a lot of times I'll present what I do as not going to supplant whatever else is out there. I love what else is out there. We're just simply pioneering new methodologies. We're the next generation of mental health care. Shouldn't come as a surprise. Now they start getting jazzed, right? They're starting to realize it fits, makes sense. It's the new future. It's the frontier, and then, like I said, is anytime I get people that are skeptical about it, I tell them I'm a convert myself. Anthony's the guy that introduced me to this. I thought he was crazy at first. I mean, he still is. If it's not for that beautiful English accent of his, I kind of wonder about him. But at the same point, he's showing me all this stuff that's going on. I'm like, holy cow, this actually works. That really ugly cap is doing something. And so I can communicate to them, I was in your shoes and I kind of was a convert. It's part of my story. So even when it comes to assuring your clients, I don't think you need to shy away from being willing to share some of your own story. All right, let me keep going. I know we got a lot of stuff. Answering, these kind of go back to what I would consider to be core concepts of neurofeedback when we're looking at things like explaining dysregulation. Okay, just so you guys are aware, the goal of neurofeedback training, I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm just being real clear about where I stand. The goal of neurofeedback is not to make a QEEG brain map look normal. That's not the goal. The goal is actually to make sure that the brain functions with a stable flexibility, right? That's how it works. And making it clear to folks that that's what they want to see in their brain, that we're going to actually help them to regulate well, to juggle stuff well. And then they start looking at me like, okay, look, bottom line is, have you ever gone water tubing behind a boat? Sometimes people are like, yes. Sometimes they're like, no, right? And I'll look at them and say, okay, look, there's 3 different drivers. If my wife's driving it, she's going to go as slow as she possibly can. She's going to go in a straight line. She's never going to make your tube go outside of the wake. And you want to know what? That's kind of boring. You're stuck there. You're just sitting there going, okay, why did I get on this thing? I want to have some fun. There's no fun going on. I don't feel like I'm having fun. And you're just sitting there. And then there's the other one, which is my son's father-in-law. I think they're listening in too. So shout out to, Josh is Josh. So, but when he drives, he'll put 4 people on there and then he'll be going left and right all over the place. He will find the biggest waves that you can possibly go over and he will do everything to make you fly off. So you know what that means? It means 10 minutes to circle back around, get everybody else on there, get them all set for a 15-second ride. Not cool. You're spending all your time recalibrating. The really good ones, those are the ones that actually let you go jump in. You have a really nice experience. You're going over the waves. You're having fun. It's making it worth it. That's a healthy brain. And I go back around and I go, you realize that sometimes your brain gets stuck. Sometimes it gets stuck. It doesn't have a lot of variation. That actually is a problem. And then there's other times when it destabilizes itself. It has to reorient itself. We got to train it back and teach that driver how to help you have fun without destabilizing. They start to make sense. Like I said, I'm not trying to compromise on the fundamental message. Dr. Morales, he was in Boston Hospital. I give him a lot of credit for that thinking on neuromodulation and the significance of what it is that we're doing with these kinds of images. But it makes it come alive for folks where they go, cool, it's a dynamic system that we need to make sense. Well, how about mechanisms of change? People sit there and they go, how can wearing a silly looking cap with a dimmer screen actually work? And we go, well, why do your eyes focus? People look at me like, what are you talking about? Well, if you look up close at your hand, your eyeballs automatically focus. Do you think about it? No. You look off into the horizon. Do your eyes focus automatically? Yep. Why? Because your brain wants to see it clearly. Why? Because we have eyeballs, and that's our number one visual, sensory organ is vision, right? And I go, what else does your brain want? Light. Your brain doesn't work without lights, does it? Right. And I go, so what I do is I tap into the fact that your brain is a pattern monster, right? Pattern monster, they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, like behavioral conditioning stuff. You get it. Yeah, everybody gets to that. I give you $5 to stand up and sit down. You'll do it until you can't stand up and sit down anymore. Very cool. You get that. Pattern reward. But guess what? Your brain fundamentally, preconsciously wants, needs, seeks light, couldn't care less what it does with electricity. So I give it light if it does what I want to re-regulate. They start getting it. It's preconscious. You don't have to focus. I can train you to do it consciously. But look, we can train you to do it that way. Now, yeah, but again, I don't get it. How does that make me not anxious? How does that make me focus? And that's where I start using other stuff. Mr. Miyagi is brilliant on this. You've all seen Karate Kid, right? I mean, a lot of the essence of what we do in neurofeedback is wax on, wax off. One of my favorite scenes in all of movie making is when Daniel goes up to Mr. Miyagi and says, you've been having me, wax these cars and do all the painting in the fence and sand the floor. I'm doing all your work around here and I'm still getting beat up by bullies. When am I going to be able to fight bullies, right? Great scene. Mr. Miyagi says, Daniel, son, do wax on, wax off. Right? He does this and Mr. Miyagi starts throwing on all these punches and Daniel's just knocking him. And he's like, whoa, the look on his face. Everything is pulling together. And I go, in so many ways, that's what happens with neurofeedback. In so many ways. That we gain the ability to block. We can deal with the bullies in our brains, those little dysregulating patterns. And we can actually do things to get people unstuck. By now, you're probably dying to find out about my butt. Sorry. TMI, don't mean this. I used to do a lot of jogging. But my knees have been given out, been running for 30 years. So now I got to go over to a stationary bike. And one of the things that I found out about the stationary bike is, after about 25 minutes, my butt was going numb. I'm on the bike and I'm pedaling and I'm pedaling and I'm pedaling. I really want to get 40 or 45 minutes in. What I discovered was if I got off for as little as 10 seconds, I got the blood flow back into my butt. I could get back on and I could go for another 20, 25 minutes. All I had to do was get off. And I tell folks all the time, that's also a part of what neurofeedback does. I'm just teaching your brain how to stop being stuck. So we stabilize what's unstable. You can learn how to block stuff, defend yourself, repetition matters. And, right, we can end up doing things like just interrupting patterns. And if I get a little interruption, makes all the difference in the world with things like racing thoughts, emotional overload. Follow me on some of this. Hopefully this is starting to make sense. Communicating in a way, hopefully, that starts to bring it alive. Establishing EEG basics. This is, again, going back to kind of like when I'm explaining brain maps and all this kind of stuff. He said, brain maps are great. They provide a lot of information, but keep in mind how unique your brain is. People love to hear that. Your brain is as unique as you are. And just because we have anomalies statistically doesn't necessarily mean it's horrible. It tends to suggest stuff. However, right, just because it's a statistical anomaly doesn't mean we're just going to get rid of it. I got to teach you to be flexible and all this kind of stuff. And I always love the fact that statistically, just because you're an anomaly doesn't mean you're a pathology. That's good. Because if you guys ever meet me, I'm 5'3", I'm built like a gorilla, and I'm a white guy. I'm a statistical anomaly for males, right? I'm like 2 or more standard deviations off on all of these things. So if a fitness trainer was working with me, now God only knows I wouldn't mind if they could make me 5'8", but that's not their job. There's nothing wrong with me. It's genetics. And simply using an illustration like that starts to help people understand. And not only that, but it also helps with expectation management. What are my outcomes going to be? Well, I'm not, frankly, again, this is me. I'm not worried about what your EEG looks like at the end. All I care about is, are your symptoms down? Are you performing better? Are you doing better? I'm going to keep going on. Let me see. I feel like you guys are probably going to be pretty good at like highs and lows. Obviously, Goldilocks principle. If you're high, this one's too much, this one's too low, this one's just right. Those are silly things that people can relate to. I always talk about band ranges as kind of like gears on a bike. You've got low gears, you've got high gears. It just kind of helps them to understand a little bit more when I enter into and I start describing what alphas are. Then when you start getting into frequency bands, I just kind of throw in, and again, I'm starting to throw in some of my fun stuff. When I'm talking to folks and I'm talking about deltas, I tell people all the time, I hate describing deltas. I really do. Because nobody ever knows what the deltas do. We don't even think about them, right? What goes on in there in our brains with deltas, right? And what is it? I'm trying to remember, like when my neuroanalysts do the write-up, they say something along the lines of there are delta deficiencies, which indicates that there's a suboptimal functioning in the neocortical dynamics. Oh, yeah, my clients totally understand that, right? Which means that there's a problem with levels of arousal and communication. I mean, and they go into all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, my gosh, you guys honest to goodness think that my people are going to make any sense of that? And what I started to realize was, I'm like, you know what? Here, look, I'm just going to kind of communicate it this way. Dr. Frankenstein's making all the decisions. You get that. But Igor's the guy that's got to go out and do the bidding, right? Or Igor, depending on the case, right? But Igor's got to go out, got to do stuff. And when you've got too much of it, Igor's kind of in charge. And Dr. Frankenstein, we're not listening to the scientist, mad as he may be. And when it's low, Igor's slacking, man. He's just not getting his job done. Now, I won't go into too much detail, but it gives me something that I can use to connect with folks. When I talk about theta, in particular theta excesses, I'm always like, that's like Novocaine to your brain. And then I just kind of start doing silly stuff, especially when I'm working with kids, right? Because excess theta in the frontal lobes, executive functioning problems, significant part of ADHD. And I'm sitting here going, okay, like, if I get my tooth done, and then all of a sudden I'm just kind of like, I'm drooling on myself, and I have a hard time talking, and it's really hard. I might even bite myself and not know it. And then they start laughing. You know what I mean? And I go, because that's kind of what theta is doing to your frontal lobes. It's kind of putting them offline in an idle state. You can't make decisions. Cause and effect relationships aren't there. And all of a sudden the parents are like, oh yeah, absolutely. Right? Communication, QEEG-ish techniques, alpha excesses. I love to say that alpha is kind of like a shortstop in the ready stance when the pitcher winds up, right? Here they are, totally focused on that batter. They're ready to go. They're focused. Why are you in that position? So you can jump on the ball when it gets hit, right? And that's a really nice alpha rhythm that's going on there. But if you have too much of them, here I am. I'm in the ready stance. And all of a sudden the ball gets, oh, that was interesting. And they look at me, I'm like, yeah, procrastination, lack of motivation, no get up and go. A lot of people diagnosed with depression. Basically, they're just alpha excesses. It's kind of funny. And they're looking at me going, oh my gosh, that's so funny. They start cracking up. It's fun. Believe it or not, they have a good time with it. I like talking about beta deficits, right? I go, beta deficits are basically like I have to work extra hard to gear up to deal with stuff. I go, it's like me trying to get a bowl of cereal in the morning. I can reach for the bowl, that's at eye level. I can reach for the milk, that's down a little bit lower. I can get a spoon, that's not a problem. But when I want to get that cereal, it's 2 inches out of my reach. That devilish wife of mine puts it up in the cabinet, 2 inches out of my reach. I'm 5'3". Good Lord, do you know what it takes for me to get that? I either got to jump up and down like a monster, like a monkey. I got to grab a stool or ask somebody else to help me with it. You want to know what Josh does? Josh, I forget. You're probably like 5'8", 5'7", something like that. He walks over, he grabs it. Boom, done. And I'm like, when you don't have betas in your brain and your voltage levels are low, you're going to feel like you have to really gear up to deal with everything. And in fact, if we start looking at something like that low voltage, fast frequency type, now I know this one well. It's my wife. I've lived with it. My wife, every day wakes up to living in a post-apocalyptic dystopia. Everything is overwhelming. Everything is a threat. Follow me on this. It's really funny too when I find this kind of a presentation. Almost every time, these are list makers. Really funny, because that's how they control their world. Everything's out of control, and yet, follow this too. If you start tracking stuff, I have found a significant, abnormal number of first responders have this kind of a background, or this kind of a phenotype expression. ER workers, EMTs. Why? Because the whole world is already out of control. What's somebody bleeding, on the side of the road? It's fine. The whole world feels that way. And it's funny when you start talking to people about these kinds of things. It's fun. They start relating to it. All right. So we've gotten it down to the last 10 minutes. I've got some other stuff that can be used. I have some other examples that we use with things like anxiety, right? Other things that we would use, ways that I would explain PTSD. I think that this is extremely helpful when you understand it, like parietal overactivation. Start talking about going to a concert where the soundboard is completely off and exaggerating all the signals and corrupting the signals. These are people with parietal overactivation. They go out every day. Their concert stinks. The whole world's an exaggeration. And I'm going to traumatize you the same way I traumatize them. I apologize for this. If you can see my image, I apologize right now for what I'm about to do. But if you have parietal overactivation, the whole world is an exaggerated caricature. Isn't everybody talking like this all the time? Could you imagine? That's what their world feels like normally. 90% of the kids that wear hoods over their heads have this kind of an expression. This is the kind of brain that can cause PTSD to itself.
I can't hear.
This is the kind of,
I can't.
This is the kind of person that wants to. Oops, Angelica, do you want to wrap up or transition?
Yes.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I will wrap up then. We'll spend some time with questions.
I said
I get exuberant and excited about all of this. Just as we kind of go down real quick, I would have you guys just check this out. If you want to do a little bit more, I encourage you to allow this to come out of your style, strengths. Couple of things on here. I'll let you read those through.
You don't hear me talking there, right? Lots of comments. This is a different kind of webinar and very welcomed because, as you said, we're not together that much. So we can't talk with each other about what do I say? What do you say? We go to a lot of webinars where there's research presented or a summary of data or whatever, what have you. And here, we're, to use your term, right? We're learning a new language. We're learning Jeff's language. And I think many of us do have languages. And this is how we learn, we learn different ways to say things. It's awesome. So I think I do want to say one thing is I did not mention the Connect Tuesdays. And I'm going to have Mitch talk about that because that conflicts with my schedule. So I have never been able to join live. I'm going to hand that over to Mitch so he can talk because it fits in nicely with what you did. And then if there's time, if anybody has any comments, because I think you generated a lot of thinking and a lot of comments, which are really appreciated. So go for it, Mitch.
Okay. So Connect Tuesday is the first Tuesday of the month. It's an NRBS, so a sponsored webinar where we get together. There's a moderator. There's actually two, Christine Tyrell Baker and then Jessica Ure. And we get together to talk about ways that as a field we can unify and, advocate for neurofeedback and then for biofeedback. And every month there's a particular topic. And I think the overall plan is at the end of the year to get together to look at all the ideas and see if we can't put together a roadmap that we can either do with NRBS or maybe share with ISNR and AAPB and just see what we can put together as a field for ways to, again, unify our field and to educate for it. So I think a lot of the things that Jeff has talked about, ways to communicate about our field in ways that are comprehensible. I mean, we've talked both about clients, but also with providers, and that. So anyway, I invite all of you to attend those meetings to give your input or to hear what people are talking about.
I see you got a couple minutes left, Jeff. Really good comments. People are
Great. Yeah, thank you everybody for your comments. I really appreciate those. And yes, very, very open to doing, if there's any interest in conferences or seminars or workshops or anything like that. Part of the contact information. Yes, these slides will be made available for you. In particular, let's see, there are jokes, believe it or not. Okay, so I want you to all make sure there are good jokes for neurofeedback. In particular, like stuff like, why are neurofeedback clinicians like zombies? Because we can't get enough of your brains. So yeah, see how those drop. They're, my staff always. I'll let you kind of have some fun with that. But then also, if you're interested, that's my cell phone. Just give me a call. I mean, anybody that's in the field, I really would love to be available, especially as a board member. That's part of my service to the board. And then also, if anybody's interested in consulting or anything like that, feel free to contact me. I do a lot of mentoring, a lot of supervision, also neuroanalysis services, concept design. I wanted to be an architect a long time ago. So I've done a lot of work on advanced kind of floor design concepts and what really works well for neurofeedback. And then I also have, probably in the next 3 to 4 months, writing a book called Launching Your Career in Neurofeedback, which should be out, soon.
Hey, very good. Thanks again. Everybody have a good rest of your week and hope to see you in New York.